Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sisters Show. We offer you down-to-earth discussions on metaphysical, paranormal, and spiritual topics.
And we are the Soul Sisters, the three of us. That would be myself, Roz Reynolds. This is Ivory Lanou and Melissa Brace. We have offices in Sedona, Arizona, where we see clients in person on a daily basis.
Today's topic is missing persons. If you have any questions or comments on today's topic, you can enter them in the chat room below, and we will answer them today on the show.
So I just want to say missing persons, the reason we decided to do that topic is it's something that we as a business, the three of us work on together throughout the year, helping people across the country. And we each bring our own unique gift to it. The way we do it together actually makes it the most effective because our different gifts and our approach to it. Do you want to talk about that, Roz?
Well, I think one aspect of this for us is, since we are all three psychic mediums, we are able to tune into the spirit of the missing person. We are also psychometrists, so we're able to tune in on locations. And we do utilize maps when we're doing this work. So I personally cannot work very well off of electronic maps. So these are the old-fashioned kind of maps where we literally are putting our hands on it, feeling the energy, and tuning in on where we feel the people who are searching should go.
You know, Melissa, you've had a lot of experience with this over the years. What's your experience with why a psychic medium would be called into a missing persons case?
It's
a variety of reasons. I mean,
many reasons, multidimensional reasons. I think it gives a different perspective of, how we focus on the people that don't have a voice right now, or the missing persons subject. So
I think for us too, it seems like the people who bring us in is usually the family, and it's because the police have already been involved. The police have done what they can do, and then they reach a dead end. And they just want help. They want anybody to help them. So it could be a friend of theirs or a relative of the parents or family or husband or wife who contacts us, who brings us into it. And at that point, they are open to whatever we can see, and they're hungry for any kind of information. And I want to talk about, for us personally, we actually don't usually go to the location. We do all this remotely. Do you want to talk about that some more, Roz?
Well, that aspect is covered by utilization of the maps. It's also covered by what I consider to be kind of utilizing the Akashic visionary, looking at the Akashic record, seeing the locations where the person actually was. Over the years, some situations where people had indicated or family thought they were going to be in other places. Turned out that we were able to redirect those investigations. In the case of, I think the combination in the case of the Akashic also has to do with being able to, for me personally, utilize the psychometric aspect. That's really probably the prime thing, I think, for me that really works, is I'm able to look at a map. This is kind of like an aspect of dowsing, if any of you are familiar with dowsing. It's tuning in on land energy, correlating that with the particular person's energy, and getting a feel of where they are in an area. And sometimes that's quite specific coming in.
And sometimes it's quite confusing, I think. We'll pick up that there's one place, and then all of a sudden we're like, they're not there anymore. That body's been moved, and that's happened recently, where we had to take a look at the maps all over again because the body wasn't there anymore. And sometimes I know Roz, you've talked about this, like sometimes once you locate the body, it's in a place where you can't retrieve it.
That's true. And I think people need to realize too that this is really, for me, this is about physics. This is about the psychometric aspect, but also the physics of the dimensional fields that we feel in a person's auric field, and those are frequencies. So it's tuning in also on the frequency aspects. Whether a person thinks that they are in one location prior to crossing over or passing over, in the case that it's a search for someone who has passed away, that has no change on the actual energy that is around their presence. So that's a huge factor. A lot of people feel like, oh, I've had people say to me, how can you do that? How can you do that? Well, I'm really doing the same thing I do in a way when I'm giving a reading. I'm tuning in on the frequencies and the energy. And I think that's, part of our other aspect of our work, because it is kind of like a reading.
I agree. For me, I'm very visual. So sometimes tuning in on a specific, like a frequency around a missing person or around a person, is sort of like a puzzle piece that you can put together, and it builds the story. It builds the line where you can find the answers, and so that's how I do it as well.
And I think the motivation for us, I know the three of us are very focused on trying to help people who are struggling with their loss. And so we experience that, we have compassion, we do empath a little of that energy of the grief, but we also have to detach ourselves from that and become very neutral and just tune in on the facts that we are receiving. And they are very factual, these situations.
I think it's good to maybe talk about a couple of the cases we've done where I'm thinking about one where we're looking for a missing woman, and it had been a significant amount of time that she'd been missing. So we started with a map of the entire state of Arizona and quickly pinpointed a wash in a very specific area. And when we went there and actually looked at that area, like within 5 minutes, boom, we found exactly where that body was, using all the skills we've already talked about, tuning into the energy. I was actually hearing the spirit of the woman stand here and here, right under where we were standing. At that point, we actually had cadaver dogs with us that came right behind us without us telling where they went to that exact location. But the point being that we're looking at maps, like feeling the energy of the paper maps of where the body is, and then tuning in as psychic mediums, like what are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we feeling? What are we smelling? And we do this kind of independently, and then we come together and compare notes. What did we get overlap on? What are the three of us consistently getting individually that, and I'm feeling energy coming in right now just talking about that, to know that's what we should really focus on. Then it's about also communicating with that deceased spirit. And that's the part I think is tricky, because even when the case is over, that spirit, if you couldn't get to the body, for some reason the investigation had to stop, the spirit doesn't understand that, and they'll keep coming to us and giving us messages and wanting to know when we're going to continue and when are you going to get my body, and my family needs closure. So it really becomes a lot more than just the time we're trying to dedicate to a missing persons case. It kind of becomes all encompassing for a period of time.
I do some work also with missing pets. And over the years, I've had some very interesting situations. About 5 or 6 years ago, a couple had their small dog had run off, disappeared, and they were frantically searching Unfortunately, I was able to tune in immediately and realize that the dog had passed over, and it had not actually gone that far from their home, but I was able to get a very simple map of that area, which actually was on the computer screen. And I was able to direct them to the location where they found the dog's collar and some other significant information in that area. So it's not just people that we work with who are missing too. Anyone who does animal communication, you realize that animals have a connecting spirit with their owners. They love their owners. There's a heart connection. There's also a telepathic connection because animals do communicate. And a lot of times, even if they have run off like that and they've gone to a different spot, they are still communicating where they are. And so that's a combination of connecting with the animal, but also the psychometry of utilizing a map. So very profound when you can help people.
It is. I thought we should probably talk about this. Something interesting happened to us fairly recently. We were talking about this yesterday, how through clients of mine who were friends with the family of a hiker who went missing out of state, I got pulled into a case, then talked to Roz about it. And then Melissa was actually out of state at that time. And talk about what happened for you with that same case.
At the very same time, we weren't even talking to each other at the time. A client that also knew the family of the missing hiker in a drastically different state that none of us have been in for years, also called me about the same case, the same missing person. So we had all individually worked on that, and then talked to each other and found that we were all
working on the same case, but from the perspective of being connected by angelic intervention.
Absolutely.
This person who got lost and subsequently passed away, his angels were communicating, family members were receiving that information. And it's very powerful. People think of it as just kind of a logistical issue, but there is a huge connectivity of our spirit guides, our angels, and the angels of the person who has gone missing. So it's pretty profound. I know people talk about synchronicity, but in those kind of situations, the synchronicity is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is. That's I know there could possibly be some coincidence, but I don't believe that was. So we worked on that for about 2 to 3 weeks and found out that our initial, everything that we picked up actually did pan out to be true. And kind of the hard thing about this, I guess, why it's necessary to have a psychic medium is police departments are taxed to the max. I mean, there's all kinds of crime going on. People go missing. There's murders. There's drugs. There's all this going on. They are short on staff. They can only put so much time into it. And when the families are saying, well, at this point, the police are saying there's no chance of a live recovery, but the family wants closure. The family wants that body so they can have closure and have a funeral with the remains and just put some closure on this whole thing. The police don't have time to keep pursuing this, and they shouldn't. I mean, that doesn't make sense, but that's where psychic mediums can come in and bring closure to these families in our own way. I don't know.
I think it's interesting. I always feel like it's important to stress that we not necessarily spend all of our energy focusing on the fact that the person has passed. I've had some cases where people came to me and they already knew that their loved one had passed away, but they needed to know how that happened because there were no answers. So these are very powerful healing. I consider them to be very healing for people, where they begin to be allowed to make peace with this and move forward in their life, because losing, anyone that you love is so traumatic, and just being able to make peace with that and have closure, that's significant. So it's an interesting, we're kind of in an interesting transition, I think, right now too, because, years back, there wasn't as much admission of the fact that the work that we do can be extremely specific and very validating in terms of providing factual information. So I've been doing this for a very long time, and I can tell you that, 30 years ago, people would just kind of raise their eyebrows. But in the last 10 years, because of probably television, the shows, the paranormal shows that have come on, people have begun to truly realize, hey, this is fact, this is reality. So it's powerful. And I think you do it. I mean, I've always felt like I want to do this to help people because of how I would feel if it was my family member. I would want to know what went on. So
it gets a little fun around here. We're each trying to see our clients, and then as soon as two or more of us have some time between readings, we're like whipping maps out and looking online and talking about hits we've gotten since we last talked, and what's new, what's come up since then, anything from the family that we need to know that would be helpful, and diving into it again, and then back to clients. So it's, as we have time, and we do this as a service.
Yeah. So
one of my favorite moments was probably about 10 years ago, where a police officer came in and did not tell me that they were in the Justice Department, and had several cases, had several papers, but didn't show me. It was shocking because, like you said, we've not always been, really believed as a tool that could help others or help in these cases. So, and part of those were from like looking for the criminals that had been missing and missing persons. And so that was really,
it's very validating,
yeah.
And it makes you realize that the work you do is credible. It's documented.
Yes.
And that the facts that we receive when we are helping, whether we are helping a family or we're helping someone in law enforcement, it's, to us, it's still the focus of trying to bring resolution. So it's pretty powerful.
It is.
We're glad to help.
There's a little pressure, I think, too, because like Ross said, we pick up some of the emotions, the desperation that the family and loved ones left, who are left wondering what happened, the things that they feel and their longing. And we do feel the strong drive to get something for them to help them bring this to a closure, but it usually is not a fast process. It can get very complicated very quickly in ways we could never anticipate, depending on the parties involved. So sometimes we're actually even seeing the perpetrators of people who murdered someone. We're not looking for that, but we end up seeing the perpetrator of a crime. And still, even though, I agree, back in the 80s is when I did my first missing persons case, and we had to submit that information anonymously to get it to the police, because we knew they would never, it was a friend and I, we worked together, and we were both getting hits of information, and then something came out in the paper, and we realized, oh my gosh, we're getting information about this serial killer that was happening at the time. And we made it a mission. We're like, we're going to go find that house. And her husband's stopping us. He's like, don't go out there. You two do not want to find a body. He had been in the military. He's like, you do not need that. I'll go. You tell me where to go. I'll find it. And then he called the police and said he was just hiking in the area. Nowadays, there's still a little bit of that, because we've been in situations where we're like, okay, well, we saw that. All of us saw it independently, and we have a pretty good idea of who the person, what they look like and what they do. What do we do with that now? Are we going to call the police and say, oh, hey, we're 3 psychic mediums in Sedona, Arizona, and we think we know who's committing a bunch of murders in your area? It's unlikely to be paid attention. And that's a shame. That's a shame. So I guess getting the word out there, having people realize more the value of involving the psychic medium when you run out of leads. It's another valuable tool is what it is.
I think over the years I've had 3 or 4 different law officers tell me, please don't wave at me at the grocery store or act like I've ever met you. It was just that's a little bit funny to me. And I said, absolutely. That's totally.
So you ran and gave him a big hug?
Yeah. Like, hey, remember that one time we worked together? That didn't happen. But, I just said a little bit of a, please don't notice me if we ever, cross paths at the grocery store or at church or, so that was funny to me.
Greatly ironic, actually, but it is funny.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And, people will be very curious about this work. I think, one thing, there's a little bit of a danger if you're not, your skills are not yet at a level where you're ready to do missing persons cases, and you insinuate yourself into a case, you can actually throw things off track, which we had happen recently as well. And it ended up
not with us, however.
Not with us, with other psychics who we didn't even know till the case ended, that there were multiple other psychics who were contributing information, and throwing the search way off may have resulted in that person not surviving, unfortunately. So it's something that if you're interested in learning more about, do some training with somebody who does that. But if you have someone who's missing, it's a good idea to pick, whether it doesn't have to be us, there's other people out there who do this work, but pick somebody with some experience at this and just stick with what they're telling you, so you don't have multiple people's opinions and views. And some of them, just if they're not trained, they're not very experienced, they don't know what they're seeing or feeling.
And like you said, it is a process. Sometimes it's not, a 3-minute process where we know everything. And it takes some time to put the pieces together. So, we need to be responsible.
It's complex.
Yes. And again, we all care very much. So, we have to take care.
True. Truly. I think
So true.
for any of you who are curious about this, there is some information online. You have to search for it a little bit, but there is information available. Situations in various parts of the country where people have run out of options. They are so frustrated, they have no answers. And usually if someone like us is called in, one of us, especially working in a group, you don't always hear about that, but there are certain little signs, like you'll see suddenly they researched another area where they had always, where they had looked before, or they went to a specific area and dug there when they had no informant, they had no information. Those are cases that kind of, give the indication that somebody like us picked up something, and very quietly, because I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I am very low key usually. I'm probably more visible now than I've ever been, but I was always very low key.
So much for that, right?
Christine has a question, and it says, how old were you all, and what was the moment that you really knew for sure? That's the question.
That you're a psychic medium, maybe?
I think that probably.
You want to start, Melissa?
I'll start. I was a little girl. This is my funniest story, actually. I was a little girl, and I didn't quite realize that other people were not experiencing or aware of other, extra things going on. Like, for instance, I would tell my parents when I was, I think, about 4 or 5 years old, that I had to brush my teeth and go to bed because I had to talk to the lady. And so this is my first memory of seeing an angel who would come visit me every so often. So, and then it just grew from there.
I think we were all pretty young.
Yeah, I was like 18 months when I remember seeing my first angel. That's my first memory of it. And spirit, I saw, all angels and spirits since I can remember. But as far as knowing I was a psychic medium, I would say I was maybe more like 11 or 12 years old, actually, before I really understood that.
And there goes our phone.
Somebody's
so we probably gotta
go.
So, do your closing.
My closing is, thank you guys so much for joining us today and watching us. If you would like more information about the things we do and how we do them, you can go on to our website, SedonaSoulSisters.com, where we all have our abilities, services, and gifts listed on there. And we are pretty specific in those descriptions. So if you had any questions after that, get in touch with us.
And tune in next week. Our topic will be transmuting fear into trust. We hope you have an enlightening week.
And have fun.
Note to self. The phone has to go under a cushion in my office. Oh, wait, no, it'll ring at that base. We'll have to unplug it or something. Or plug it in elsewhere. Yeah.
I thought that was sort of funny.
It was
funny.
really
People are obviously, well, I'm so thrilled. We had somebody ask a question on our first show. That's not normal. That's great.
I thought you must have planted somebody.
No,
Did we do
no,
okay?
I know.
And did we do okay? Because at the very beginning, I kept knocking you because I was like,